Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we? Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. So happy to have each and every one of you back today, and super excited to have my guest today. We've got Scott Davis. Scott is the CEO and co-owner and expedition leader and guide, so a man of many hats with Cheeseman's Ecology Safaris. Scott, welcome to the show. Happy to have you here.
Well, thank you, Jason. Happy to be here.
Scott, I guess the first thing I want to ask you is, where are you physically located? Where do you live?
I live just north of Monterey, California, a little fishing town called Moss Landing. It's about 10, 15.
Very, very, very cool. We're gonna get into your background. I'm not going to ask you now if you're from there originally. We're going to get into the background. We're going to figure that out during the course of the conversation. And I will share with anybody that's listening to this and isn't able to see Scott, he's got a amazing photography on the wall behind him. So I know that that's going to be part of the conversation as well. So, all right, Scott, let's, before we go back in time to figure out how you got from where you were to where you are now, let's give our listeners just kind of the elevator pitch, I guess, for Cheeseman's Ecology Safaris. What is it you guys do?
Well, we do many things, but we're mostly known for being a small-scale boutique safari expedition team that takes people out to these beautiful places on all 7 continents to experience wildlife, nature, deep immersion into these locations that we go. So it's these small group scenarios that we most specialize in.
Yeah, I noticed that in our previous conversation, and then spending some time on your website as well. It's definitely seems to be about the group trips. Is that 100% of what you do is group trips? Or if somebody maybe that's traveled with you in the past asks you to set up a custom trip just for them and their family, do you do that as well?
We definitely do that too, because often we have these people that had such a great time on our initial expeditions and trips and safaris that we do, that they have family members and they're like, can you do something for the 5 of us? And we're happy to set those up too. We've been doing, these safaris and expeditions for upwards of 40 years. And obviously I wasn't there at the very beginning, but I've been working with them for about 18 years now. And it's certainly something that we love to do and love to set up, because that way we can kind of tailor fit it to each individual, especially if they come in as a private group and maybe they wanted one more day here or one more day there. And that's where these little private safari designs come up.
Very cool. Do you get some clients that start out with the private? Because I understand the course of, they've been on trips with you before, they had a great time, but maybe they want to go somewhere that you don't have something set up, or maybe the dates don't align or something like that. But do you get some folks also that start out as maybe what we call the FIT or whatever you want to call it, the private departure, and then potentially probably end up going on group trips with you later, I guess?
Certainly. We go in either direction. If you start out with one of our small group trips and see something that you want to do, but by all means, if you have an idea and we work in those locations, which it's a pretty good chance that we do, since we do operate almost everywhere, we're happy to set up something initially as well.
Well, I'm happy you mentioned that, because that was actually the next question I was going to ask you. Not so much where do you go, because I know that would be a long list. But are there any place, maybe the easier question is there any place, any larger place? I'm not talking about a particular village somewhere, but are there places that you generally don't go or don't offer?
Well, of course, safety is a concern for our guests and our clients. So for obvious reasons, we're not going to go into areas that have maybe a little upheaval going on,
Hmm.
certainly war zones, places that would kind of make for a little bit too much risk. We do like to take good care of our people, and we want to bring them back to their families, and certainly want to make sure that that happens every single time. So yeah, those kind of places.
I'm sure our listeners appreciate that
Yes.
completely. Are you currently doing something on all seven continents?
Yes, in fact, I just a week ago got back from Antarctica, and now I'm adjusting to my temperate zone here in Monterey Bay, which is gorgeous at the moment. Yeah, last week I was in Antarctica and South Georgia Island. Amazing expedition, super happy people, and can't wait to make that happen again.
Very, very cool. Okay, it's time. I wanted to start asking you some questions that are going to be tied into your past and kind of again how you got from where you were to where you are now. So let's just jump into that. Sometimes I ask people, where did this all start? Some people say, well, I was born on such and such a day in such and such a town, and
Right.
other people only go back 5 years or so, and then I usually try and encourage them to go back a little further because I suspect it didn't. Obviously you mentioned you've been there a while, so how far back do we need to go to kind of get an understanding for how you ended up doing this kind of work?
Boy, I would start pretty early on. As a kid, I was just kind of starstruck with these articles that I was paging through National Geographic magazines.
Yep. That comes up a
I
lot in these conversations. You're not alone.
I have no doubt. I mean, it's an amazing organization, and I'm sure they were the inception point or conception point for many of us that have this sense of wanderlust. Thankfully, my parents had a subscription, and I would just get lost in those pages and say, those are places I want to go. And so yeah, probably starting at age 6, 7 years old, I started dreaming of these faraway lands, these exotic destinations, and pretty much I was lucky enough to have a career path that allowed me to explore these places.
To achieve it. Yeah. So I'm imagining you, also myself, and some other folks we kind of know collectively here in this community at one point had that vision of I want to be a National Geographic photographer. You're a photographer. That's a big part of what you do. So do you
Yes.
remember the earliest age that thought crossed into your mind? Do you remember that moment?
Again, those pictures, those photographs, those articles in the magazines, specifically, Nat Geo and Life magazine and those others. I started picking up a camera at a very young age. I think 8 years old. I found a camera, one of those really cheap little SLRs
Hmm.
that was in my parents' cabinet. And, obviously this was back in the film days. And
Hmm.
so I started photographing about 8 years old, went to a summer camp where they had photography as one of the activities that you could do. And so I started dabbling in the dark room right around that time. And it's kind of been a lifelong obsession ever since.
Wow. Do you remember where your parents, it sounds like they were supportive of that. If they sent you off to camp where you could do it, and it sounds like they were supportive. I personally remember my father because it was back in the film days. And I would take pictures of everything. Every time I got a hold of his camera, I would take pictures of everything. And then he would give me so much grief when he'd go to get it developed. He's like, I'm spending all this money. You took 14 pictures of that cow. You got to be more selective if you're going to do this, or you're going to have to start paying for the film and the developing. I'm just wondering if that conversation ever came up with in your family.
Not so restrictive. I think that's why they were probably pretty happy when I built my own dark room down in the basement of our house. They were like, okay, at least he's taking responsibility for as many photos as he wants to take, but he's going to be the one buying the chemicals and the paper. And back in those days, at least with my parents, you had chores to do. They give you an allowance, and
Hmm.
so a lot of my allowance money went toward the materials needed for the dark room. So they were encouraging for
It
sure.
sounds like it. How old were you when you started the darkroom?
That probably went about age 13.
Oh my goodness. It's so
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. So, but there was something magical about going into this dark room, and you didn't know what was on your film. You had an idea what you shot, and then the magic was it kind of appeared in the chemical trays, and you had this tangible object of moments or days before that you had shot something. So there was a little bit of anticipation to see what would come out, what would reveal itself in the dark room.
That is so cool. I've got so many questions rolling around in my head. Let's start with, again, your parents. What were they into? Were they into photography at all? Or were they, you mentioned they were supportive, but what were your parents into when you were young that maybe helped influence? Well, they obviously had the subscription to National Geographic, so I'm guessing they
Right.
were kind of open to the world, but tell us a little bit more about that.
They were open to the world. I have to be honest. They were a little perplexed because I was very much opposite of what my parents were. My parents kind of came from a business background. They did not camp. They did not go out in the woods. They did not do any of that. My heroes were Jane Goodall and Tarzan, and it was my great thrill to go out and like camp for a night or two by myself. We lived out in the woods, and so I was able to do that. So more than once, they kind of kidded to me that maybe they brought the wrong child back from the hospital because initially very little in common, and maybe that was the impetus because they had their world, and I've always been an independent sort from the get go. That I would go off in a completely different direction, totally
Wow.
alien to them.
I don't know, I'm not sure if you ever had the conversation with them or figured out. I mean, based on what you just said, was it just a coincidence that they had National Geographic? Was there somebody else in your family that set that up? Maybe grandparents,
What
or why do you think you were getting those magazines?
well, I'm not sure the exact reason, but they did like to travel. They were curious about the world, like many people. Maybe they were a bit more armchair observers in
Mm-hmm.
some of those respects. So they were into keeping up with current events. They certainly had newspaper subscriptions, like I mentioned, Life magazine, Time magazine, and so when these Nat Geos kind of came out, they would certainly enjoy reading the articles. They'd like to keep themselves informed. Unfortunately for them, that kind of rubbed off in a different direction. Not only did I want to read about these places, but I wanted to go to these places. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
What about the maps? I was really into the maps. I remember at one
mm,
point I had maps of all these places all over the walls in my room. The
mhm.
photos were important, but for some reason it was the maps that I wanted to put on the wall. Do you remember
Oh,
anything about the maps? Yeah, okay.
yes, definitely. Well, you're looking through this magazine and it's talking about, the Congo. And it's like, where's the Congo? And then you go off to your map and try to find these places. Again, my parents had a big atlas in the house, and I would kind of page through that and be reading about, the chimpanzees of some region.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're like, okay, where's Uganda? I don't know. I'm 8 years old.
Mm-hmm.
My experience with Uganda wasn't that in depth yet. So yes, the maps go hand in hand with all of that. To this day, I'm still a fan of maps, and will happily sit down and like chart out places that I want to go and explore.
Do you, Well, first of all, so remember, like they had the maps also. You had an atlas, which is great, but they also had like the maps would be inserted into the magazine. And I always think whoever came up with that idea, because it might not be intuitive. We're going to do National Geographic. I guess it makes sense they would put maps in there, but there's
But
the
yeah,
pictures and the stories, and then that map. It's like whenever whoever decided to put an actually fold out map in there. I don't know if
yeah.
adults responded to it the same way, but I was so excited to get the maps and pull them out.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It's kind of like that little secret toy surprise in the bottom of your cereal box. You couldn't wait to get that new map. And for a time in my college dorm room, I would have maps up on the wall that came from the magazines
Uh-huh.
and be like, all right, this is a cool map. And, little pins set up the places that I wanted to go and, kind of set those goals early on.
That is so cool. And I'm wondering, well, did you have siblings?
I did have a sibling. He passed away at a young age while
Okay.
I was my first year in college, and he was in high school. And
Oh
he
my
passed
goodness.
away. One of those kind of freak things where his heart stopped, and it wasn't while he was playing basketball at school.
Wow.
And in some ways, that probably really motivated me not to waste time
Mm.
because I learned early on that things can be taken away so fast, and I was 18 at the time, and right then and there, it's like, okay, you can't waste time. Tomorrow Suck it all in. So if there was a little silver lining in all of that, which was definitely hard at the time, that was probably one of the main lessons learned from an experience like that.
Wow, I can't even really imagine. I did not have that experience.
Which I'm glad.
Yeah,
No one should have that
yeah, no,
experience.
absolutely. Do you remember, was it just a little bit of a, I shouldn't say a little bit, was it more of a mind shift, or was there something specific that you did right around that time? Like, did you, like, you probably know, but I'm thinking like an example, like, oh my gosh, I went to school for accounting and then my brother passed and I dropped out of school and went to be a ski bum in Montana. I mean, any major changes like that, or was it just a kind of an overall mindset shift?
A little bit of both. There were a few factors, certainly in university, that put me on the course that I am today. Like many people, it sounds like including yourself, when you first get to college, you're young, you don't know what you exactly want to go into or focus in. I certainly had these loves and desires of seeing the world, but 18, you're not really sure how to go about doing that. So you kind of listen to the advice of your parents, and my parents were like, well, business degree, that's a nice solid degree, go in that direction. And it was pretty early into my college experience that I realized accounting was not my forte. Political science, all the things that go along with that degree were like, no, this is not
It's
a good
not me.
fit at all. Not a good fit at all. And so I kind of about halfway into university, sophomore year, just realized, okay, we've got to figure something out. And I started taking some biology classes and ecology classes. And I have to say that it was one professor there in particular that just opened up this whole new world that no, there are opportunities to spend your time in the field watching animals, studying animals and wildlife. And that just major shift as far as where my life would ultimately lead up.
Do you remember when
So
your
a
parents,
quick shout out to Dr. Donald Shore. If he's out there listening, he definitely
clearly,
kind of,
I can see it in your face. For anybody
oh
that
yeah,
doesn't have the pleasure of seeing that, I can see the respect and appreciation that you have for him. So yeah, that's it's pretty special when we run across somebody like that. That kind of the light bulb goes on and like, oh wow, this is.
yeah,
And especially, I mean, our parents are great, and parents tend to, not all parents are great. I shouldn't say all parents are great, but I'm sure your parents were great. I'm sure, and my parents were great. But sometimes after 18 years of kind of following what their thought process are and their priorities, and
yeah,
maybe you're thinking, I think I'm curious about something else that maybe doesn't fit into their paradigm. And then you
right,
run across somebody else that's like, oh, he gets me, or
right,
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but it's like, or I can relate to what he's talking about, and
right.
that's pretty special. Because sometimes that doesn't happen until we're much further along in life, and sometimes it's like, wow, look at what that guy did with his life, and I missed out on it. So it's good
Right.
when we meet him early. Yeah. Do you?
Definitely shows you how important these instructors and these teachers and professors are in our lives. So
Yeah.
more kudos to the people that choose that as a profession and then inspire their students in ways they might not even be aware of.
Yeah. And it tends to go around. I mean, I suspect you've inspired a lot of people as well as a result of
I
that.
hope.
People, maybe some teenagers that came on a group trip with their parents that showed up at the beginning like, oh, I don't want to be here, I'd rather be wherever
Hmm.
else. And then at the end of the week they're like shifting gears and they're wanting to look at school to learn biology or something like that. I suspect that's happened on a few occasions.
It has, and it's always rewarding, especially if you just get a message out of the blue, say 10 years later, from somebody, especially a young person, and said, you know, this is what I'm doing now, and it was because, you let me know that this is a possibility that's out there. So yeah, incredibly rewarding when that happens.
That's very cool. Do you remember, so as your parents were advising you on going to school for business management or a business degree, do you remember thinking you wished that you could do something else, or was it one of those situations maybe where I really want to go to school for photography or something? Um, but that was just didn't feel like an option because sometimes we're dependent on our parents to finance these things too.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, I just wasn't happy with the courses. Business is a very different, business studies is very different from, wildlife and biology, which was certainly where my kind of passions were. So the feeling that I was probably in the wrong course set probably after the first semester or two.
But
Forging my way through financial accounting. And to be honest, there was a very dramatic moment. I didn't go about it half-ass as far as quitting. I remember distinctly it was the final exam in my second semester of financial accounting, and I got it. And I looked at the test, and it was just rows and all the stuff that goes along with accounting. And I said, okay, this is it. I'm committed to not doing this. And I got up within the first minute of the exam and handed it back to the professor and walked out. And sure enough, I got an F in the class. It's hard to come back from that, but it also is the only F I ever got. But it was a committed move at that point.
It sounds like it. I remember hearing the story. I don't know if there's any validity to it or not. And I may have the facts or the names wrong, but I think it was something about Cortez when they landed on one of the islands. We're going to take the island. And he looked at his men and said, okay, burn the boats. There's no retreat. Burn the boats.
Committed.
Right?
Yeah.
And then they realized there was no way back. And it kind of sounds like you burned the boat.
I definitely did. And I remember having a little chat with the parents. I didn't tell them what I had done. I just said, I think I'm going to be changing majors. And they're like, there was a little hesitation on the line. And they're like, do you know what? And I'm like, not yet, but we'll figure it out. And yes, there was a little hesitation going on there.
When you say you didn't tell them what you'd done, I'm just curious. Be a little bit more specific. You didn't tell them that you intentionally failed the test, or that you failed the test.
Well, they ultimately found out, the grade that was received.
That thing.
Yeah. But they did want to see that, and no, I did not tell them the dramatic fashion, which I had come to that conclusion. I don't think they would have been too thrilled with that. And in hindsight, there's probably better ways to go about it. But.
Kind of sounds like breaking the dishes. Your parents keep asking you to wash the dishes. And if you break a dish every once in a while, hopefully they'll decide, okay, well, maybe washing dishes isn't for him. So maybe we should encourage him to do something different.
Yeah. That's when you're paying for a class though, there's like, well, you could have just said no.
Well, could you really? That's the question. But I'm curious, like in high school, like when your parents like, you should go to business school. In high school, before you started, was there a moment of, I don't think so? And like maybe when you got into business school, like, yeah, that I should have insisted on going to school for photography or something, or biology or something like that. I was just curious or maybe you didn't even realize until you got to that point in college.
Well, in high school is, a time of just trying to figure out a lot of things at that point. So at that point in my life, I didn't have an idea that, once again, you could make a living going out into the woods and being like Jane Goodall. These were just mythical creatures out there that somehow, right time at the right place, explorers and scientists, or who knows, they came from money or royalty and they could go off and do this stuff. But for the rest of us civilians, that's really not an option. We didn't have the internet at the time. Yeah, I'm old. So
you and I both.
You couldn't, we couldn't do these searches and find out, oh, wow, there's a lot of opportunities out there, or here's how you go about doing it. You couldn't just search out how to become a wildlife photographer, how to be a wildlife biologist. You kind of had to figure that out on your own, which made for a few course corrections early on.
And that really emphasizes the value of your professor that you had. That helped you see this, because he had seen the other side. He knew it was, and it's great. And with the modern technology, there's some challenges as well, but with modern technology, even I think of just this podcast, we have conversations with people that have done things like what you're doing. And I love the idea that people can, if they're remotely interested in adventure travel, how would I how did these people do it? There are resources out there like this podcast to
Yes.
listen to, say, oh wow, he did it. His parents encouraged him to go to school for business management, and maybe we're coming up on the end of the semester now. Maybe someone's going to be listening to this and go in and bomb their test in purpose and think, wow, yeah,
No,
Scott told
I
me to
hope
do
I
it.
don't get some angry parents calling me up that said their son or daughter decided to go in this direction because of this podcast.
You
I'm in
know,
trouble. So will you.
yes, exactly. I have to ask this because if I don't ask this, I'm going to wonder about it. And I don't want to wait until we stop the recording to ask. So 13, you've got a dark room in your basement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You and I are about the same age. You might be a little younger, but I don't remember any of my friends. The word that comes to mind is, I don't know why, but it's eccentric, and I'm not trying to label anything. But did your friends know that you were that into photography, or was that something you kind of kept to yourself?
Yeah, I certainly didn't talk about it a lot. I wouldn't say I was obsessive, where, I did have a social life and I would hang out with friends and I played sports, but there was something almost meditational about it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you'd go in there and you'd put some music on and you'd have these few hours of just quiet focus. No, I wouldn't say they really knew, but in high school, there was a photo club. We had a dark room at high school too, so
Okay,
I
that's
didn't
cool.
have to. I didn't have to pay for the chemicals there, so I would
Uh,
often, and more than once, I would use my friends as photo subjects and photograph them. So they were aware of it. I probably wasn't aware that this was going to be a serious pursuit either, because
mm-hmm.
again, as a teenager, you don't think, especially in those times, that this could lead to a profession, especially the kind of photography that I was most interested, which is photojournalism and documentary, but not to the point where I wanted to go down to the local newspaper and take photos of football games. That's not kind of the stuff I wanted. I'll be out in the jungles of Borneo somewhere.
I don't know why this is coming to mind, but I also really enjoy capturing moments. I love the animal side of it, but I really, as I've been traveling full time for 4 years now, and I run into
Nice.
so many interesting characters just
Absolutely.
on the streets or in restaurants or just wherever. I just run into these very interesting people. And I've got this fantasy of being able to just photograph people.
Mm-hmm.
I've got this story in my head that, no, that's creepy. If I just stop people on the street and say, hey, can I please take your picture? So there's so many things that I would have loved to have captured,
Right.
but I'm afraid to be that weird American guy that's trying to, take advantage of whatever situation. I don't know. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that, because
Sure.
I can see pictures on the wall behind you of people that are really, really cool photographs. And
Right.
so what are your thoughts on just walking up to strangers and asking them to take their picture?
It's interesting because that's probably one of the most common things I hear from my guests that come on, because I also lead these photo workshops, and they might be cultural ones where we do go to another country and it's not simply wildlife that we focus on, but actually the cultures and the peoples. And I would say the number one thing that the people always say is like, well, I just feel odd about
Yeah.
photographing somebody. And it is not the easiest thing to do, but I think you kind of have to put yourself in this kind of almost like, think of yourself as a photojournalist, and you got to focus on, okay, let's just pretend this is your job and you have to go out. Your editor is saying you need these images, and get past that little barrier, and you're going to find out more times than not, your subject is going to be receptive. And especially if you're in another country and they might be just as curious about you as you are about them. And so now you are doing this action that is forging a connection between the both of you. And some of those moments have led to incredible interactions where, even though the language barrier might be there, but maybe through an interpreter or just, kind of feeling your way through, they invite you into their world. A smile will go 100 miles in a positive direction too. And once they see that you're not like this kind of threatening creature with a camera, but more this person that's looking for a connection, many of people, at least in my experience, will bring you into their world. And that's where some truly amazing images happen. I mean, I've had so many times where that's happened, being in a tribal community, and before you know it, you're being welcomed into this family and that family, and they want to bring you into this person's hut or shelter or home, and they want to share food with you. And sky's the limit at that point once you've broken down that initial shyness factor. So I say go for it. Don't.
Wow. I am so happy you asked that question.
The worst that they can do is say no, or say no, and then you respect that. And I've had so many of my guests, especially when we go to these places and they get past that and they kind of follow some of the suggestions that I make, and they're like, that was amazing. That was truly amazing, Scott. So yeah, it's a cool thing.
I can see the part of creating the connection once you've gotten past that initial moment, whatever that looks like, to have that connection, because I've had similar connections. I mean, really the way to create a connection is to create some sort of connection. And so whether it's the photography or food, for me, I've had the best experiences connecting with people over food. So I might be in a cafe or even eating street food somewhere, and I'll just ask people next to me, what are you eating? Just something as simple as, what are you eating? Or
break that wall.
Or help me figure out what to order. That is probably the number one thing for me that I've created connection with is, hey, what do you think I should eat? What do you guys like? Whether it's the server, the person working there, or just somebody sitting at a table next to me, I'm like, what do you like? And then they start asking you, well, do you like spicy? Oftentimes there's a language barrier, but the conversation goes something along the lines of, well, what do you like? Well, I don't know. What do you like?
Right.
And I'll eat anything. So it's pretty
well,
easy.
It might be a cliche, but, breaking bread is one of these things that it's universal among humans. We all eat, and we typically share interest in eating. So there's a commonality among that, no matter where you are on the planet. So I think that's a great technique to break into that little barrier, that little shyness barrier. Who are they? What are they doing?
It's just so fascinating. The conversations that come out of it. I remember some street food in Bali, and this really small, away from the tourist areas in Bali. And these three young ladies were standing in front of this place, and I wanted some food, and I was asking them, what do you like? And then they suggested something, and I got something, and I shared it with them, and then they're sharing their food with me. And it's just this moment. I'm not even sure we got to the point of discussing names or anything. It didn't really matter. It was just a moment and a connection that for me makes traveling fun. Because I travel solo a lot. So if I want to have any engagement with anybody, I got to step outside my comfort zone.
That's fantastic.
So when you're with your clients and helping them figure out how to break that barrier and take it to the next level to engage and take photos, is it, and I know this is tough because there's so many different cultures and everybody's different, but is it generally, can you break the ice right away with the take your photo part, or do you generally encourage them to warm the person up with some other sort of conversation before you jump right into, can I take your picture?
Yeah, I think each scenario, each situation's a little different, and especially as time goes on, you kind of get a sense of which strategy might work better. Some of it's opportune, where you're seeing something going on that immediately catches your eye, and in those moments, you, as a photographer, I want to capture that magic moment before you've broken that barrier, because it's only there for an instant. And the moment you're like, can I take a picture? And
everything's changed.
Yeah, totally changes what was happening. And so in those moments, yes, I'll quickly take a photo, but I might follow it up with a smile and like thank you very, very much. That might break it. And then there's other times where, yes, I'll keep the camera down. I'll kind of forge a little bit of back and forth in one way or another. And then as they get more and more comfortable, then the camera might come up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they're relaxed, and you might get some magic, photo moments from those moments.
Do you find a lot of your subjects are actually, I don't, I'm not going to use the word subjects. It feels weird for me. So a lot of the people that you meet and you take photos of,
right?
Do they generally seem to be pretty enthusiastic about seeing their pictures? Like, I assume on your
Yes.
camera, you probably have the monitor so you can, like, they want to see it, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah,
probably
definitely.
encourages. Yeah.
Digital photography is changed that dynamic between your person that you're photographing, and you can now visually show them that, rather than back in the film day you click and cross your fingers that you got it. Especially among children. Oh my God, children, before you know it, you got to be a little bit careful, because you might have 50 children at the end of this little session that started with one or two. At that point, it's just entertaining. It's a bit of a circus, but it's fun.
Because how do you say to the other 47, no, I just wanted a picture of this one.
I just wanted that one. Yeah.
Yeah. But fortunately it's digital, so you're not spending the time and money to develop the paper.
Well,
So,
plus you're also getting, at that point, you just, again, put the camera, getting the shot that you want out of the picture.
Yeah.
And now you're concentrating on the moment, engaging. So it's not a bad second.
No, it's super. I mean, the truth be told, that's probably why I feel like I would like to capture these pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Is because it's not the pictures. I'm not a photographer. I don't have a photo website. I've never sold a photo. Mm-hmm. But I think it's about creating a connection of some sort. Mm-hmm. Because I see it, and if I feel like I just want to engage with that person, and I don't know how mm-hmm. else I would engage with them. I mean, maybe through food, but yeah, so that's interesting. I did want to ask you, in my experience of traveling, I've had people ask me to take their pictures quite often, because mm-hmm. I'm in places. And actually, one interesting thing that I've experienced is quite a few people that I've run into want a photo with me. And that's fairly common in Asia, as far as I can tell. Yes. There were quite a few times that people would walk up to me and maybe bring their grandparents up and say, "Can I take a picture of you with my grandmother?"
Yes.
And initially, the first time I was there, I thought, they think I must look like somebody famous, because I don't know who they would think it is, but they're treating me as though I'm a celebrity, and they want to get a selfie with me. And I had to have a conversation with someone there that explained it to me. Well, they don't see a lot of guys that look like you, and it's kind of mm-hmm. cool. They want to share it and all that stuff. And that was pretty cool. Where I was going with this is, when I've taken photos typically of younger to middle-aged women, mm-hmm. they like to see the photo, and then quite often they're like, "Oh, okay, nope, that's not going to work. Take it again." You know what I'm talking about, I think. So you stand there and take 20 pictures one at a time. Nope, that's not going to work. Let's do it again. Right. Have you experienced that as well?
Oh yeah, I think we are hitting a universal among, especially the countries that you were speaking about. I always do, because here in the States, it's pretty much never going to happen. Someone's going to come up to you and say, "Take a picture with me." Yeah. Or usually the opposite. They look at you with a bit of like, what are you trying to get from me? But it's very different. I can't tell you how many times I've been, made two new friends all of a sudden want to have photos taken, which is also very endearing, very charming, almost a childlike innocence that it's exciting to be around. But yes, I think also, as you were talking about pertaining to the ladies, there's certainly a amount of vanity that exists throughout the world, and it cracks me up.
Yeah, well, and I've noticed that they've got,
everyone wants to look good in a photo too, so you don't want to.
And I think at least
forward.
Yeah, and I think at least 50% of the population, without going any further and just saying 50% of the population, have a good side and a bad side. Hold on, let me change sides before you take the picture, and that's cool. I love that. But again, it creates a connection. I love that I'm somewhere in Thailand with my arm around an 80-year-old mm-hmm. lady that
is looking at me smiling like this is the coolest thing that's ever happened to her. And I know it's not,
Yeah.
but
Right.
it's just that you can't not, well, I cannot not feel a connection when those things are happening. And it's pretty fun. So I think we're going to get back probably to some more photography stuff, but I do want to make sure that we kind of get the story from, you switched over to biology. Was it
Yeah.
biology? Was that the new major?
It's wildlife biology and anthropology. Again, back to the Nat Geo cultures. So I was trying to mix up both of those worlds, anthropology and wildlife biology. So.
All right. So when you had this professor, you're going to school for anthropology and biology, wildlife, wildlife. Yeah. Okay. What were you starting to think as you were getting into that? What was the career path that you envisioned, or were you even that far ahead?
Yes, once I started focusing on specifically like the wildlife biology and ecology courses, I much more so than I didn't know that there were anthropology jobs out there that still did exist, other than academia.
Uh-huh.
So the wildlife part certainly drew me, I guess, a bit stronger as far as making my way through this world and being able to pay my bills. But I'll preface it by saying, don't go into wildlife biology if your job is to get wealthy or anything like that. It's not. Do it for the love
Yeah.
of your subject matter. But certainly, as senior year approached and graduation was soon approaching, and you're like, okay, I am going to have to start paying bills next year. With the help of my professor, he was able to, back in those days, again, before the internet was there with all the job offerings, there were newsletters that would go out and with lists of biology positions throughout the U.S., be it seasonal and so I started subscribing to those and realized, okay, there are potentials out there working with agencies, government agencies, private agencies. They needed wildlife biologists in the field. So that's kind of the direction I started to go at that point.
What did the typical entry level, I guess, coming out of college or university with a degree in wildlife biology, what did the typical job opportunity look like on these lists?
Well, for me, I was interested in animals. So there might be my first position out of university was with Wyoming Game and Fish Department, and they were looking for seasonal jobs or seasonal job applicants for biology studies that were going on. And I was lucky enough to be put on this team that studied grizzly bears. And so
Cool.
Again, right out of college, I was really fortunate enough to have what, at my opinion, was a dream job. I'm like, wait, you're going to pay me to go out and capture grizzly bears and put radio collars and track their movement patterns, and being part of a 5-man team that did that. And so that job for me was like, this is it. This is it. Now, when I think back, and I think I was being paid maybe $200 a week, just enough to pay my bills. But at the time, I didn't care. This was like awesome.
Yeah.
I'm riding horses in Wyoming and spending pretty much every day out in the field, up on mountains and forests, and tracking big charismatic animals. So yeah, it was great.
That's very cool. I actually had a job out of between high school and college working for Wyoming Game and Fish.
Oh, no way. Really?
I was making fences. I was making game fences that they could take to the landowners and put around their haystacks and everything to keep the elk out. It wasn't quite as much fun as what you did, but I hadn't earned that yet. You had earned it. So that's cool. Very, very cool.
Good for you.
Okay. So that was the first summer job, presumably. Correct. Did that last into the winter? Probably not.
It lasted into the fall. At that point, the bears start going into hibernation mode.
They don't need to hire someone to track them because they know where they're at.
Spring, right? Once they go into their dens, at that point, your job is your responsibilities are fairly limited. There was just a series of seasonal jobs, especially for someone that was younger and just with your bachelor's degree. As far as I'll be honest again, I didn't want to climb the ladder to the point where I'm behind a desk
Hmm.
that was, you know, analyzing a lot of the stuff that all your field guys were bringing to you.
Hmm.
I wanted to be out in the field. So there was a series of other openings. And once you get your foot in the door that first time, that's kind of the hardest, I think, those first one or two. But
Right.
now you're getting in this network of field biologists that maybe your manager knows another position that's opening up, or they bring you back the next year, or
Hmm.
lots of opportunities to start doing. So if you did it right, you could time it, and when one study ended, you'd have another one starting up 2 weeks later, and that's kind of what led me to working internationally, because I might be working here 6 months and then a study opens up in Micronesia, and then I go out there or down to South America, and they're out there. You just have to put some effort in.
During that part of your life, were you exclusively doing wildlife biology jobs, or did you end up mixing that in with any sort of tourism or hospitality? Because sometimes, based on 150 so conversations with guests on the show, there have been a few
Right.
that maybe did the summer wildlife biology job, and then they were a ski instructor, and that's kind of how they got into the hospitality and tourism, or they worked in hotels.
Mm.
Did you have any of that stuff mixed in the beginning, or was it literally just back to back wildlife biology jobs?
It was mostly back-to-back wildlife biology jobs. Yeah, I would work. I mean, some of the studies were long. They might last a year, or as long as the funding was there. But some of them, 6 months.
Hmm.
And I was pretty good at organizing the next one so it synced up. And as long as I could kind of keep going, and the time between the two, but there was definitely a time where I lived out of I had a old 1987 Isuzu Trooper, and all my world's belongings were in that Trooper, and I would just drive from state to state working on these things, and at the end throw it all back in and then head back out. So I look around and see all these beautiful vans these custom vans that people are
You didn't
living
have
out
one
of
of
right
those?
now. I had one of those, I probably would have stayed a biologist a little bit longer.
But you have to get a YouTube channel to have one of those vans.
I think so. Yeah, there.
Not a
Some of
degree
those
in
are
biology.
yeah. I was gonna say I never would have been able to afford one because some of those vans are $250,000 vans I see.
I don't know how they do it. So I'm curious how you managed to transition that into more of a, let's be honest, a tourism role, because you're still doing a lot of,
Hmm.
obviously the background and the things that you experienced still apply to the work you're doing now, but how did you transition that? And was it an accident or on purpose?
It wasn't an accident. It kind of ended up being a bit of an evolution of kind of the direction I was going. Again, on all these studies that I was working, I was fortunate to work on some pretty cool studies with charismatic wildlife, grizzly bears, sea turtle populations, coral reef ecology, that sort of stuff. But I always had my camera with me, and I
Hmm.
was always photographing and documenting the work. And there were moments where those images were utilized for magazine articles and stuff like that. So a little side income started coming in from the photography angle,
Hmm.
where magazines would say, "Hey, we need these images," and certainly the editors, they became familiar with your work, and they would say, "Okay, we know that you have this. Do you also have images of these animals?" And I'd be like, "Actually, I do." And so bit by bit, now this is over the course of years
Hmm.
of doing this, that I thought, well, what would happen if I started to focus a bit more with the photography? And then when that started to happen, I would get communications. At this point, email was a thing.
Hmm.
And I'd get these emails from people like, "Hey, I saw you with images of sharks. Can you
Hmm.
take us to this place? We want to get those images ourselves."
Ooh.
So I would end up working with, film crews or individuals that wanted to go out and photograph some of the subject matter that they had first seen from me. And that's where I think the leading trips kind of evolved as well. And then probably, geez, now it's going on 20 plus years ago, I decided to make a full force effort into what would happen if I started running these trips and expeditions to these places. I had kind of come to a point in the research world where I'd done a lot of the things I wanted to achieve. I'd worked with National Geographic. I had was one of their National Geographic Explorers, and worked on a number of other species and animals and locations. I'm like, okay, let's try this direction, see what happens. And it's been going pretty well ever
It's working.
since. So
It seems to be working
yeah,
for you.
it's working.
Yeah.
I'm not complaining.
I love that. Did you, so when you started taking the group trips and leading the trips, did you feel that it was mostly the photography, mostly the fact that you were a naturalist and wildlife biologist? Was there one thing that was, I don't know, more important, but there was one thing that helped you more than the other? Or is it just absolutely a mix of probably two or three different things?
I think to succeed really in this business, yes, you certainly have to have a certain skill set to back up, these areas that you're going. But you also have to, I think, be able to establish relationships with your guests that you're bringing out there and really bond with them in a way that they realize that they're not just a number. They're not just, a dollar sign or anything like that. You're building a friendship. You're building a relationship. And so you get, at least what I hear from a lot of my clients, that especially the ones that come back time after time. We have some clients that come back, 10 trips, 12 trips now. No, that's a sizable investment over time.
Yeah.
But they went on, I'm not going to name any names or anything like that, but they've gone on other trips where they just said, oh, we felt like we were nothing more than a vehicle for, the trip leader to get his stuff or, photograph. And I've heard that so many times, and they're like, it's pretty obvious that your priority is for us to get our stuff.
Yeah.
And you're there as a facilitator, certainly someone that gives advice and training or teaching. But I think, and once again, it goes back to my professors in college that were really supportive, where yes, they knew the science, but their job was to relay their knowledge to help you. And that's kind of the priority that I take when I take my guests out to these places.
What I heard you say, Scott, was, or what I formulated in my head based on what I just heard, was that it's maybe a three-legged stool, right? You've got maybe the wildlife and the scientific background.
Right.
But then you've got the photography and kind of capturing that experience. And then also the ability to lead trips. And that's a really, really, really big one that most people may not consider.
Right.
You can, if you're one of the head photographers for National Geographic and they put an ad out that go with so-and-so to such and such a place, people are going to book it just because, my gosh, this is, I don't know the guy, but I've seen his work and da-da-da-da-da. But that doesn't mean that he's a good trip leader. It doesn't mean that and to be honest, maybe some people that grow up in dark rooms, not you, of course, clearly,
right,
but maybe some people that grow up in dark rooms and become hyper-focused on photography, or maybe somebody that becomes hyper-focused on wildlife biology, doesn't necessarily have the best people skills and the ability to connect with people and spend time with them in the field. Is that, so it's kind of all three.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm sure there's some Nobel winning scientists out there. They know their subject right and left, but they might not be the best at teaching someone else how to do it or establishing relationships with other humans.
I can't help it to remember. And the gentleman that I had on the show, he was great. And they do paleontology trips. So they've got paleontologists that go out and lead these group trips. Sure. And one of the questions I had with him, we won't go into the names of who it was, but one of the questions I had for him, and he answered it really well, was, how do you find a paleontologist that also really has good people skills, and wants to spend, a week to 10 days to 2 weeks with a group of people?
Right.
And that's not a question, I guess. I'm just thinking, sometimes the scientific people are not necessarily, the ones that want to spend a lot of time in labs and stuff like that may not be the ones that want to go spend time with people. What do
Right.
you what do you think it is about you or your upbringing, or is it just purely your personality that makes it work so well for you?
I think, well, probably again going back to those Nat Geo paging through the magazine articles. For me, I can say that I'm curious about stories. I'm curious what other people. I rarely like to talk about myself. In fact, I will put it out there on the record. I don't like to talk about myself. It's a little uncomfortable shot for me.
But you're
This
doing
is
really good at it.
yeah,
You're not talking
this
about
is my
yourself.
first. Yeah,
You're,
this is
you're
my
just telling
first.
your story. It's not about you, but okay.
Yeah, I'm telling a story, but I am genuinely interested in where people are coming from that tells their story of like how they got to be who they are, why they're a certain way. So for me, that kind of helps with my just innate sense of curiosity of hearing other people's stories. So when my guests come on these trips, it's rare for me to, I don't like being in the spotlight. I want to bring them into the spotlight.
Well, you have
I
to be
think
in order to be a good trip leader. It can't be about you.
I think they appreciate
Yeah,
that. They're
yeah.
like, okay, he's interested in what I want to do, and
Hmm.
it's not about him. So
There
maybe,
was,
hopefully, that works. They enjoy that.
yeah, it seems to be the case. And I think that's true. I think, anybody that's been around travel, whether as a traveler or somebody in the industry, has run across that guide that is all about talking about how great they are and what kind of great, wonderful experiences they have. And they love to just share information in a way of, wow, look at how much I know.
Right.
But honestly, I would probably rather go on a group trip with someone that their first time being there, they know nothing about what's going on, but they're interested in the guests
Right.
and they can engage in a conversation. It's just, I personally just think it's more important. But one of the things, part of why I wanted to ask that question is because you also majored in anthropology,
Hmm.
which is an interesting thing because that is people, right?
Yes.
People's
Yeah.
stories, really, in a sense. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of what anthropology is.
That's
So
what
it's
led
not
me in
some,
that direction.
yeah, exactly. So it's not something that just came up later when you thought, oh, I can make money leading group trips. You were already interested in people. So
Yes.
that's an important distinction.
Yeah. All of us have stories. I mean, you could take a profession where it might be, uh, one of those ones that you go, oh,
Accounting?
I'm not, yeah, like accounting or whatnot. And I guarantee you, I can speak with an accountant and find out something really fascinating about
Oh,
what led them into that life, or at least fascinating to
yeah,
me
yeah,
because not all of us grow up thinking, "Oh, I want to be an accountant," or again, not denigrating any profession out there, but
yeah.
as a child, you don't think I want to sell insurance. Uh, you know, I've had people that come from those professions on these trips, and I found each and every one of them interesting,
Oh, yeah.
and their story that led them down their career path, even though they're like, "Oh, you don't want to hear it; it's boring." It's like not to me.
I I get that. Every time I can't think it was right before we pushed the record button, I mentioned that I'm back visiting family here in Arizona. And
Hmm.
every time I come back to Arizona, my mom's not going to drive on the freeway to go to the airport to pick me up. So I'm doing the $90 Uber from the airport to my mom's house. And
Wow.
but what's great about that is I've got 45 minutes or so to an hour with an Uber driver here in Phoenix, Arizona. And
Right.
almost there are many, many times I've been gone traveling the world for 4 or 5 months, and I come home and the most fascinating conversation I have during that time frame is my ride from the airport with the Uber driver. Because for
Yes.
some reason here in Phoenix, they're people, I remember distinctly a guy that was Kurdish from northern Iraq who
Right.
worked with the military during the war. And we had a fascinating
Yes.
conversation about, northern Iraq. And I remember I walked in the door to my mom's house. I'm like, I'm going to Iraq next. She said, what? I
Wow.
said, no, the driver I was just with, we spent an hour talking about his family and his upbringing and his culture. And
Yes.
the last trip to come here a few days ago, it was a guy from New York City. And I got in the car and immediately I said, "Oh, you're from the city, aren't you?" He's like, "You can tell, is it that bad?" No, it's not bad. It's cool. And we talked about his kids and his time that he spent in Brazil and
Yes.
fights with girlfriends he'd had. And, this is a big tattooed guy.
That's a great story.
Yeah. From the Bronx. I was a Bronx, actually, Brooklyn, a Brooklyn, New Yorker guy that'd been in Arizona for 6 or 7 months driving Uber. It was a fascinating conversation. I loved it.
Yeah.
So it's an important part. And if you can't enjoy stuff like that, you should probably not be a trip leader.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to work.
It just seems so unfortunate to go to one of these places and your leader is, aloof or, off doing their thing. And now you're like, okay, what was the point?
Yeah. I remember exactly. I remember I got a job because of that. I went and visited a place that I had already kind of decided it would be great to. I managed a place off the coast of Belize for a while. Mm-hmm. And the first time I went to visit was more of a fam trip because I was going to maybe bring some clients back. And I just ended up on this fam trip. And shortly after I got there, I realized that the guy that was running the place at the time, not the owner, just a person that was working there, no names. And he just was super smart guy, knew a lot, but there was just that connection with the guests was just missing. And I realized it. And so the last day I went to the owner, I said, "Hey, if this guy doesn't work out," knowing he wouldn't, nobody could listen to this and figure out who I'm talking about. So anyway, but it was pretty clear that wasn't going to work out very well. So it's like, and then I ended up back there 3 months later working the place. It's important. It really is.
It's critical important. I would say in addition to, solid field skills and leadership skills, your relationship skills are one of the most important things to have out there, at least if you want to be in this business long term.
Yep, absolutely. Appreciate that. So tell us a little bit about just getting started with Cheeseman's.
Well, funny enough, I was working on a photographer assignment. I was working with a company that kind of specialized in high-end Fortune 500 stock images. I was one of their contract photographers, and they asked me, they go, "Scott, we want to send you somewhere to acquire some images. Where on this planet would you like to go?" And pretty much the sky was the limit. Oh, I know. It was.
Man, that must have been difficult.
Yeah. And at that point in my life, the only continent I had not been on was Antarctica. And so it'd always been a dream of mine to go down there. And I made the pitch why I need to go to Antarctica. And they were a little perplexed because that certainly wasn't on their radar. I'm like, you'll get images.
Because they're thinking, we don't need a bunch of penguin photos.
Yeah. Well, to many people, that's the only thing that exists down there.
Exactly.
I'm like,
that's what they were thinking, yeah.
There's stories right and left, the people that live down there, the scientists that are down there, the people that work, of course, the animals and the scenery and climate change is becoming a thing and you're going to want like symbolic imagery and stuff. They're like, okay, we'll send you down there. And so it was my job to find a company that would get me down there. And I started doing my research and not only get me down there, but, in depth. I needed time in the field and I needed maximum time. And so I narrowed it down to 2 companies. And I ended up, Cheeseman's at that time was based up just north of me near Santa Cruz, California. So I was able to sit down with Ted Cheeseman, who was the son of the original owners. And he's all like, "Oh, why don't we meet for lunch and you can tell me what you need about this assignment." And so we met for lunch, told him, he goes, "Oh yeah, we can do that." And so I went down to Antarctica with Cheeseman's Ecology safaris. That was my first experience with them. And that was back in 2007. And went down there. It was a fantastic experience. Spent a month down there traveling all around. It was ship-based, expedition ship-based, and saw some amazing things, lived up to all the hype that I had built up in my mind. So I was super happy. And at the end of the trip, I just offhandedly, Ted was there as the expedition leader. And I just kind of offhandedly said, "Hey, if you ever need a guide, extra guide, because we bring our own guides on these trips, you have my number, give me a call." And sure enough, the following year, he called me up and said, Scott, you still interested in guiding for me down there? Because we got to know each other over that month, and he realized I came from a science
Hmm.
background and
Yeah.
had boating skills and
A
captain
personality.
skills. Yeah, personality. Sure enough, that's where it started, and from that point on, I'd been going back every year, and then the time came where I think Ted wanted to pursue other career and life goals, and he contacted me, and we got to talking about taking over the business. Having worked together for 18 years.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a,
You get a sense of the kind of people that want to keep the baton going.
yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So at this point, because you just got back from Antarctica, mention that.
Hmm.
And I've seen the list of trips that you're leading on your website. It looks like quite a bit. So
Yeah.
how many trips, how often are you in the field, or what do you want our listeners to know about kind of what your life looks like right now?
Well, thankfully, I still love being out in the field. A little different than being a field biologist, but to me, that's one of my happy places. Currently, I'm usually on the road about 280 days of the year.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time, but I've always, professionally that's been my life. So it doesn't feel any different. It doesn't feel arduous or like it's tough. It's just like, no, it's just like my field biology days. So yeah, 280 days in the field, but it gets broken up into many different locations now. Like next month, I'm off to take a small group to find snow leopards in the Himalayas in
Super
Ladakh.
cool.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
after that, swimming with whales in the Caribbean, and then Namibia after that. So yes, there's a lot of variety now.
Very, very cool. I have to ask you this question. I thought about asking it a few times, and then you mentioned snow leopards. There's a movie that is it that I might get the title slightly off, but it's The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Are you familiar? Does that ring a bell?
Yes, absolutely. That's I have to say, as far as that type of film, it's one of my favorites. I
It is
love
mine
that
too.
film. The one with Ben Stiller in it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, because we talked on film and negatives and a few different, and then you mentioned the snow leopards, and I was like, I have a feeling that Scott has probably seen that movie.
Yes,
It's so I wanted to the reason I wanted to ask you, because anybody listening to this, I would endorse it. I think if you have a little bit of wanderlust or the
absolutely.
imagination, it's a little bit
Yes,
of a weird movie, but it's so cool. So
it's great. It's a
anyway,
sweet film too. And there's a lot to glean from it
yes,
too.
a lot of a lot of meaning, a lot of
Life, chasing your dreams, that sort of thing. And it's funny, you mentioned that there's a character in that film, the photographer character. I'm not going to
mhm.
give away anything, but many of my friends often say, "You're that guy."
Well, that kind of came up when I was. That's why I wanted to ask it.
And so when I watched it, I'm all like, "Oh, well, that's actually kind of a cool compliment because the guys, I don't know, Sean Penn does a very good job
Yeah,
with it."
it's interesting because when I watched that movie, I actually resonate for some reason with Walter Mitty,
Hmm.
because I've worked in tourism. I've done some stuff that's definitely different than what he would do. But a few years ago, I sold all my stuff and started traveling, and just made the decision that I'm going to follow my dreams and I'm going to go do
Right,
those things. And
right,
and it's interesting because in the movie, when he's younger, he was ready to go. He had all his plans lined up. I think his father passed away, and he ended up
yep,
getting a job at Papa John's Pizza. I don't know if you
yeah,
remember that part. It might not have made in
yep,
the,
yep,
yeah. So he worked at Papa John's Pizza because he needed to take care of his mom and his family and all that stuff. And I
right,
remember at one point in my life, I was all ready to go. I was in the army. I had a little bit of time left. I was going to get out of the army. Met
right.
somebody, ended up with a baby, and was working at Papa John's. So when I watched that movie, it's like, oh wow, this is it's
So
really,
you're the Walter Mitty.
yeah. It's maybe I'd rather be the Sean Penn guy, but I guess
No, no,
you
no.
got that role taken. So
The Walter Mitty character is amazing, and it does serve as an inspiration. If you're not doing the thing that you feel that you were meant to, try to find a way to do it anyway.
yeah,
Because yeah, before you know it,
yeah,
our lifespan gets to a point where you can't. And so you
it,
don't want to you go through life and look back and have too many regrets. One or two is fine, but not a lifetime of them. So yeah.
That's a
Follow
that's
you.
a that's a great message, and I hope people listen to it. Scott, we discussed a bunch of things actually for quite a while, a little bit longer than we had actually intended, and there's still some things I want to ask you, but we'll have to come back maybe and do that again sometime. But before we wrap up, I'm curious, what did I forget to ask you? What do you wish I'd asked you, or what do you want to make sure our listeners know about you, Cheeseman's? I think you just gave a great life philosophy, so we've got that covered. But is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap up?
I mentioned I don't like to talk about myself so much. I'd much rather be behind the camera. So at this point, no, I think it's been great chatting with you and know you better, and I'll have more questions for you probably too. Your story sounds interesting to me as well.
Very, very cool. Well, see, Scott, that's why you're such a great trip leader, because that's exactly what I would expect from a great trip leader. So thank you. Thank you so much. I think you brought a tremendous amount of value to our listeners. It was super fun to hear your story. And it's definitely one that I will remember and probably reference in future conversations with other people as well. So Scott, thank you so much. Appreciate you. Have a great day. And I look forward to meeting you on the road somewhere.
Pleasure, Jason. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Scott.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.